And we're live. Hello! That's only me. Guys, welcome to Thursday night, Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change. And as you can see, I look like I'm getting interrogation light right now because only one of our two lights actually works. Teresa, what are you doing? Love you. Double K, love you too. Appreciate you guys coming on tonight. Make sure to smash that like button. Make sure you get this out to as many people as possible. We'll get into Wasserman Schultz and the legal issue that may be abound for her. She decided to go on CNN, as you guys know, at the beginning of the week and make her pitch to fellow Zionist Dana Bash about how Sheryl Sandberg and her millions upon millions of invested dollars to continue the propaganda bullshit of the Israel lobby so that they can continue the genocide against the Palestinian people. Well, looks like there might actually be a legal recourse that could actually be used against her, and it's pretty ironclad from what I read. Now, of course, is somebody going to actually bring the charges against her? Nah, that's another story. The person running against her for Congress, I'm sure, would, and she is a lawyer, so that could certainly help. As we know, we have a lot of fights ahead of us right now. And at this current time, AIPAC and just the Israel lobby in general is doing anything and everything in their capacity to ensure that their power structure is not messed with. And obviously no place that we could possibly think of is having a greater effect on that than in New York City right now, particularly in New York's 16th Congressional District, which of course today is an auspicious occasion. Because, thanks to AIPAC, the New York 16th congressional race in the Democratic primary in New York is now officially the most expensive primary in the history of politics. Now, of course, these types of records are going to get broken probably fairly often going forward. So it's not surprising to me that this has happened. They are firmly determined to make this so. But the thing about New York that makes it different than, let's say, South Florida is that the activist community is very big and very aggressive, and they get the work done. And no better example of that is the Long Island activists, who we have been very friendly with for a number of years now and will continue to be. And the person who has led that charge for a number of years is not only somebody I respect and admire a lot, but also a friend. And he, of course, is back again, I believe, for the third time. Robert Buonaspino, welcome back to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change.
Oh, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so happy to be back, and we have a lot to talk about. I brought along colleagues of mine who collectively make up the core leadership group of Long Island activists. So,
well, you can't do it by yourself. It takes a village. It takes a city. It takes the Empire State. So, please, I am going to allow you because we've got two of them in the background.
Okay.
So, please introduce Tella.
Okay, Tella Troge. Tella is an amazing person in so many ways. For one, she is a native Shinnecock Indian. She is an educated lawyer who actually is the tribe's legal counsel and has been involved in many legal battles with the current governor and prior governors, and has done so much to enrich the lives of our tribal members. So I'd rather she speak more about what she's been doing. But Tella Troge, we welcome you to this group as well.
Thank you for coming, Tella.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
And along with Tella, we have Marco Lamos. I think he's in the wings there.
We do. Please introduce Marcos.
So Marco works for nonprofits where he helps out people who may be suffering from HIV, if that's the right term, or might look for
dealing with,
right, and also preventative work. He's done that for a number of years, and I'd rather he talk about his background. But he's been a valued member of LIA for at least 2 or 3 years now.
Marco Lamas, welcome to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah.
What happened to Tella?
She's here.
She's all kinds of garbled stuff on my end.
But we would be amiss to not bring back our returning champion. He has always brought the heat, to say the least, and I happen to know him, so I can introduce him. You know, when I think about what it's like being in Florida and just other parts of the country, not everybody gets where we're from. Being New Yorkers, me being a Jerseyite, it's like, yeah, it's, our brand of tea is not for everybody. But I always say you will always know where we stand, and if there is anybody who will always tell you where they stand, it is Joe Sackman. Welcome back to Pontificating with Pete on Generational Change.
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having us.
Anytime. So, of course, there's many places we could go this evening, and I look forward to this wonderful conversation with all of you guys. But let's, deal with the elephant in the room. This is the most competitive. Well, I wouldn't even call it. I mean, yeah, it's competitive. There's no question it's competitive. And I think we all want to be cautiously optimistic about what could happen on Tuesday, but certainly believe that Congressman Bowman will be able to win the day when it's all said and done. But the fact that this is now the most expensive primary in the history of American politics. And of course, it happens in the Democratic Party, the party that claims to be for working people. So no surprise there that that's where this is happening. The hypocrisy knows no bounds. But please tell us how things are looking, why it's gotten this out of control, and is there still hope for the grassroots game that so many of us have invested a lot of our time and effort and, frankly, our lives in?
Joe, you're going to take this one.
Okay. I mean, it started with AIPAC, right? It's a simple fact. Jamal Bowman had some stances that they didn't like. Matter of fact, they attack anybody who doesn't 100% agree with them. So, Republican or Democrat. And the strange thing is, AIPAC is an organization that backs most of the people who supported the insurrection, and is well funded by Republican donors. And they went out and they sought somebody within Congressman Bowman's district, which is George Latimer. He's the executive of the county there. And, they're like, who do we get to run against him? And so they picked George specifically to, primary Bowman and get him out of there. So, and if you ever listen to Jamal Bowman, I know some people don't totally agree with everything he says, but he does represent the working class in his district. He was a high school. He was a principal. He started a school in the Bronx. He did really good work there before he became a congressman, and and he served the district as best he can. And he took on an incumbent, I think a 20-year incumbent when he primaried, who was a no-show, who never showed up in his own district. And he's done a lot of good work for people of District 16.
I just want to interrupt for a second, Joe.
Please.
About his principalship. Jamal came to NIPAN several years ago when he first was looking to run, and he made a case for himself. I'll just tell you the thing that really struck me as an educator was when he said not only did he help build the school, he was the first principal of the School of Social Change, which was designed for middle school kids, 6th grade to 8th grade. He said, as principal, I want to teach them the good, bad, and ugly of U.S. history. So dissent to me is important. So he says, as principal, I got power. He says, I shut down the school 4 times a year just to do protests. That won me over. As a history teacher, I know the good, bad, and ugly of our history. And you need to protest. So that same core group of students, 6 years later, became the core of his campaign staff, along with working with the Sunrise Movement. So I found that to be a really amazing thing about the person himself. Now I'll go back to Joe because he was doing a great job. And as usual, I interrupt my friend.
How do you get an Italian to stop talking? You tie their hands behind their back. That's what
this is true. I'll do my best.
Well, I think the second part of your question is how is the grassroots doing compared to what's being there. I mean, I can tell you right now. I hopped into my car today, and there was an ad against Bowman, praising Latimer. It was paid by some group. Was in Latimer's campaign, radio ads, television ads. They praise Latimer as if he's some sort of progressive. Progressive is a term that's bandied around as if it's like a magical thing. You have that label and you're automatically a progressive, when reality is a lot of times you don't even hold any progressive policies. And it's hard to start. I kind of find it hard to use that term sometimes, because the people who use it, like Cuomo or Mayor Adams, Governor Hochul, I think, has said that too. They've said it, but then they've also like walked back using that term. So calling yourself progressive means nothing. It's what your actions are. And so they're praising Latimer as some progressive, and that he's, and really what he's done, if he's done anything for his county, is the bare minimum of what someone on the left should be doing. And then totally attacked Bowman as if he was the boogeyman, as if he was a Republican, as an alt-right conservative. And that's the type of stuff we're seeing here. So there's a lot of money being spent. And the tough part is when you have that much money being spent on ads and radio and television, you're touching those voters. And you need a tremendous, campaign infrastructure to knock doors against that. So the struggle is real, because you've got to go out there and you've got to hit every door that you can to have a conversation. And those conversations do move voters. Those face-to-face conversations, I think anybody who's running a campaign understands that is probably the most important conversation you can have, a face-to-face conversation with the voter. But it's hard to get a lot of volunteers out there to do that.
It is.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with the same problem here in South Florida, even though we do have a wonderful team that's helping Jen on the ground against Wasserman Schultz. But at the end of the day, it is the summertime, which is the toughest time to get people to canvass. And as Tella, and I want to get you in here, Tella, can definitely attest to, climate change is real, no matter how much you want to pretend it isn't. And I also would like to get your opinion about the race right now, because I am not somebody who buys. I think people get overly dramatic about certain elements of the political arena. I think some people tend to use, certain issues when it comes to race and culture as political footballs. They don't actually care. They don't actually address the issues at bar that really matter. It is pretty safe to say, in my general observation of Councilman Latimer, who is trying to become the congressman, he is a bigot. There is no getting around it. The language he uses when it comes to natives, when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to the Black community, he's really letting it fly. It's almost to the point now where he just doesn't care, because I think in a way he thinks he has it in the bag, which may be a very big mistake on his part. But can you talk about your perspective in still in observing this particular type of race, and how this is a race between basically the working class Bronx versus the affluent suburbs in Westchester County? It seems pretty direct at this point. Am I missing anything, or do you see it the same way?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate when we see that kind of adversity in the political landscape. My nation is out on the east end of Long Island, so we deal with, all types of different people. We have people who don't know that Native people still exist on Long Island, and yet we're dealing firsthand with the effects of climate change. We live in the largest unsewered district in the entire United States, so we're literally suffering from billionaires' wastes polluting our water, destroying our way of life, and we're fighting for real elements of survival. And so it becomes very real, and it becomes very moving to want to get people engaged in making a difference and standing up for what's right, rather than the jargon or these types of politics that are based in bias and racism. There are so many real issues that we have to deal with today, that it's really important and critical that we can stick to things that are truly important and benefit all of us, like clean water, clean air, and other essential things that are going to help all future generations survive. So we always are motivated politically to activate to protect those things and support those candidates who have those interests in mind.
Amen. Couldn't have said it better. Marco, your thoughts?
Just touching on your point about the state of grassroots activism and political activity. I mean, it's very disheartening when you see the amount of money that can just avalanche a progressive campaign. Anybody that is even remotely left of Bernie Sanders, whether you saw it in Buffalo, you saw it tried to be done in Philadelphia. I mean, everywhere every time that there's a big wave of elections, and there are I also, to echo what Joe is saying, absolutely hate the co-opting the progressive means someone who is who supports a certain kind of policy, certain types of policies, and it just becomes like a marketing term that you just have to have in your flyers, in your radio commercials, because it is popular. It is a popular thing. Progressive policies are popular. Just everything that FDR and really Henry Wallace fought for is just everything that's been eroded in the last, since the 40s. So I'm actually in Long Island activist. I'm not going to say I'm a pariah, but I really don't have any faith in electoral politics whatsoever. I think that time is better spent organizing labor and organizing workplaces and doing that kind of activity, because we have a dictatorship of duopoly. We have two parties that serve the same master in industry and in business, the banks, the big, so I don't expect change to come through the route that the oppressor class has set forth for the working class. I just don't see that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why would if I was in power, I'll give you the illusion of choice, but I'm not going to give you actual change. If I'm in power, and it's so absolute, because wealth is concentrated at the top. And that is it. That's the game, dog. Like, that's it. That's where we're at. Like, now it's like, I can't fight this avalanche of money. It takes so much out of your heart, to when you see that, when you go,
sure,
oof, they're just throwing money behind a candidate. Who's heard of Latimer? Like, who knows who his family doesn't. They just found out he's running for whatever for District 16. So
I definitely agree with you that the avalanche of money is a very big problem, and everybody chooses to play their given circumstances differently. In Bowman's case, which is I think just a reflection of why he even still has a reasonable shot at winning, is because it's very difficult to take out an incumbent, especially if you're an incumbent who is actually trying to serve the community in a positive way. Those relationships get built and they become a lot more solidified, because people will put boots on the ground, they'll put money into a race. They don't need to put that type of an avalanche into a political cause. The problem with AIPAC is that it is predominantly funded by some of the most affluent people in the country and around the world. And
also, how is that not how is that not election interference?
Well,
how are we looking at all these characters at Richie Torres and all these people that are just advocating ferociously for Israel? I'm like, hold on, Richie Torres in particular, you are the representative of the poorest congressional district in the country, and you're supporting sending money abroad? How does he walk through his district is actually probably a pretty good question. Does he visit the community he represents?
Well, this also gets back to the whole issue, pertaining to, social justice politics, which I think is extremely overrated, because if you're not framing it from the perspective of labor, which is really where it begins and ends, then all you're doing is just masquerading as somebody who actually is just doing it for their own political benefit.
But you know why, right?
Oh, well, of course, everything's
because
about money.
If you separate the African American struggle against law enforcement and the LGBTQ struggle and just the regular working class struggle and the immigrant struggle, if you separate those things, it's much easier to. I work with very, very marginalized folks, and they are not. They consume current affairs in a very passive way, mostly because of the struggles of their day to day. That's probably all. If they engage with current affairs, then it's at a very, very like surface level. And I hear it all the time. Well, oh, these immigrants get this. Why are immigrants getting that? You know, when I can't get housing, and I reiterate to them that the system of oppression that pushed a Venezuelan out of Venezuela is the same system of oppression that suppresses all of our wages, unless any of us are independently wealthy. In that case, you got dinner next. But you know, unless you're somehow miraculously, you know, in a it sounds like it was you, Bobby, teasing. But you know, it's if you're in the struggle like everybody else, like that has to be presented. Especially Democrats that frame it in such a separatist manner within the marginalized communities of this country, they're being dishonest and are actually are undermining the greater struggle.
You know, one of the things that I noticed, and I recently had a fellow, you can call her comrade if you want, Yulene New was on the podcast this past week. She should be on Capitol Hill right now. We all know why she isn't.
Mondaire Jones.
And so since he is now running for Congress again and decided to throw Mr. Bowman under the bus because he thinks that that's what's going to get him in, I think that another part of this equation when it comes to the real progressive movement, the ones who are actually fighting the fight on behalf of the working class, the deterrent comes when people that you think you're supposed to be able to trust are people that just stab you right in the back. See, now that's a big problem. Mondaire Jones was somebody who, again, like Richie Torres, is a gay black man, and he used that to his advantage in the political sphere, in the Democratic progressive part of the political process, in order to ascend to that spot on Capitol Hill. Now he's trying to get it back, and he's still trying to use that maneuvering component while at the same time getting right in bed, just like Richie, with AIPAC, which stands fundamentally against everything that they supposedly are fighting for. And people who are on the ground in activist communities look right at them and say, we see right through what you're doing. You're not fooling us. And it does create a lot of voter apathy. Just like you said, Marco, there are a lot of people who want to be involved, but then they see this, the money, the bullshit, and they're thinking, what's the point? Why? Okay, so we fight them off this time, and let's say they win. We're going to have to deal with it again in 2 years. It's never going to stop, especially because our political and economic system is so broken. So how do we get past that? And do you agree that voter apathy, because of the fact that we do have people like Mondaire Jones and Richie Torres who completely use the social elements of our society that are the most hurting right now. They use it as a weapon, as a political football. And that is what gets people to just say, fuck it, I'm not getting involved. And I think a lot of that I think that's a big part of it. What do you guys think?
We have to stop the culture of like idolatry that permeates in politics in this country. Like there is a hagiographic tone that gets used when you're talking about certain, and I go, no, like these are just regular people and their actions. That's what matters. Like, I don't care. You know, Al Sharpton actually said something interesting, like in the 2004 election that he was running.
I was going to say this had to have been a long time ago. So
it was a long time ago. I was a child, which was a long time ago. And he said it doesn't matter. This is when the gay marriage was like at full swing, right? And he said it doesn't matter who you go to sleep with. What matters is if you have a job in the morning, right? And that permeating, like, that's what unifies it. Everybody's got a job. Everybody's got an exploitative boss, except for Bob, who just retired. But everybody else has I feel like I'm signaling you out, Bob, and I don't mean to. You know, it's all love. Okay. So, you know, that's the unifying thing. And And the solution is not, this is my personal opinion, and I don't speak for the entirety of LIA, but I don't think that you can vote your way. You can't vote any harder. The hardest we voted was for Barack Obama. People showed up for him. People expected hope and change, which was a very specific thing. It's not a vague thing. The hope was that he would end the forever wars, right? That was prevalent in our minds at that time, and he didn't do that. I really don't believe in giving him credit for the right to for gay people to get married. You're extending human and civil rights to people. That's not a matter of celebration. It should be shame that it took you that long. You know what I'm saying? You don't get brownie points for a duh thing. That doesn't fly. Like, no, do better. That should have been a thing years ago.
I'm sure you can remember. I'm sure you can remember when Hillary Clinton was interviewed by Chris Matthews in 2007. I was like, "Do you think gay people should have the right to marry?" No. It's like, God damn it!
No.
This is why people hate this shit. Now, of course, Hillary's the worst of the worst, and I say that, and I'm not suicidal. Just want to put that out there. Sorry, I have to do that as a disclaimer. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying I just have to put that out there.
Blink twice if you're being held.
I'm perfectly sane and perfectly safe. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is a good person. So anyway, I do think that one of the reasons why a lot of people find Trump appealing and find probably not so much the GOP, but just Trump in general, is because there is this perception that he's a straight talker and people are just so tired of the system. They're so tired of the bullshit. But I think in a lot of ways they're tired of the hand wringing on the it's not even the left. It's just the Democratic Party establishment that are constantly using these virtue signals to claim the higher ground, when in reality, they are giving people false hope because they're never going to fight for the things that really matter. It's not the GOP that is stopping single-payer health care at the state level from passing in the state of New York. It is a select few Democrats who are bought by private insurance and big pharma, just like everybody else, is the reason why this hasn't gotten through. Now, how do we deal with that? And I know Mr. Buenaspina has something to say.
No, I was just going to say that I get frustrated, though, that when President Trump was president, and he did say he was for universal health care, he had Republicans in charge of both houses, and he had Democratic support because they wanted that all along. Yep. Why didn't that happen? Well, no, you're right, but I'm just saying, like, I don't give much credence to the fact that the Republicans support this stuff. They don't. They could have made it a national law. They didn't. Could have had infrastructure happening when Trump was president. The very first 2 years, the Republicans took control. Remember that, of both houses. So I have very little faith in the Republican Party. Forget them. And I have only a small glimmer of hope with the Democratic Party. That's my take. And I'm with Brother Marco, on the need of a national strike, regional strikes.
Oh, I didn't get to that. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I was. They've heard my spiel before. So
excuse me, but the special guest of the evening is now on camera. The most important person to show up. I mean, let's be honest. It's not that I don't like people. I just prefer dogs. I mean, I'm just
you don't deserve them.
Marco, you were going to say something about national strike?
No. Just to agree with you that's what I was getting at, because Pete had asked, like, what is the solution, and it's the only thing that gives any of us value in the eyes of the ruling class is our labor, and so withdraw your labor from the economy in mass, and because they're not they're not gonna make their own coffees, and they're not gonna pick up their own trash, so it's all of power is in the hands of the working class. And it's a matter of like Sean Fain of the UAW is doing, and he's unionizing in places that are so deep in the South that it was inconceivable 30, 40 years ago that it could happen in those places, and he's making it happen. So those are things. I think two things are possible when the economic standing of people gets so bad, and it's you can organize in a progressive manner, truly progressive, not like just just lip service progressive, or you allow it is fertilizer. Bad economic conditions are the main fertilizer for extreme right fascist movements.
You know,
It's
you bring
never
up a
happened. It's never
Right.
happened. You know, there had to be a depression before the Nazis became the Nazis. You know what I'm saying? Like it goes hand in hand.
You
Economic
needed
depression.
you needed a Jimmy Carter before Ronald Reagan. It's that simple. You know, these things don't just happen out of nowhere. They just
Speaking of
don't.
election interference,
And that, of course, well, I tried. I did what I thought I could, and the American people are certainly grateful that made a lot of money. And of course, those that didn't, and there were a lot more of them, were certainly not as happy. And that's what I remember. Tear down this wall. You know, he was a phenomenal. I mean, listen, if you've never listened to a Reagan speech, especially when he was still coherent in the 70s and even in the early 80s, he was amazing. He was an amazing speaker.
he's an actor that knows how to recite lines. That was his job.
But his actions, his policies, particularly the tax cuts, you could make the argument that the first round of tax cuts in 1982 was necessary, but then you bring them back up again when the economy is stabilized. Instead, they cut them again. They redid the fairness doctrine and everything in his administration. Listen, he was not the worst. There were worse presidents in terms of actual economic policy, particularly Bill Clinton on the domestic side and George Bush on the foreign policy side, that were absolutely worse than Reagan. But Reagan set things in motion that had never been set in motion before. This idea that government can't do jack shit for you, that you're basically one man on an island and the government, the 9 worst words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And you know what? Tens of millions of people bought into that shit. And they're still buying into it today. Bobby?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that Bill Clinton line.
Yeah.
Really, he was an awful president. An awful president. He's the guy, correct if I'm wrong, who said the era of big government is over. Is that a Bill Clinton quote?
No, actually, if you want me to remind you of what I said when I was president, it's very important that you hear this. So what I said was we were going to change things in America. And by change, I mean make it a lot better for people like me. And so what I did was I gave you NAFTA. I gave you normal trade relations with China. I gave you the crime bill. I gave you the Telecom Act. And I repealed Glass-Steagall. So thank me.
Yeah. But just look at how much he screwed up the Democratic Party. I mean, that Democratic Party was the party of change. They were the party of the Great Society, of the New Deal. By shifting the party to a party that was anti-government, he basically made them into Republicans, right? And then shifted the Republican Party into crazy.
That's a trauma response. That's a trauma response from losing everything from 80 to 92.
Right. No,
that was very traumatic for the Democrats.
How wrong that was. You look back at 40 years later. Now you do anything that's big government and you're a socialist. Socialism, moo. Marxism, moo. Give people food. That's terrible. They should starve.
But let's be fair now. And again, this gets back to the whole thing of why was the Reagan Revolution so dominant in politics? And that basically you got the Democrats' version of Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. That is what you got. And the reason this happened is because the Democratic Party establishment has basically destroyed the party from within since Kennedy's assassination. And then it took on a whole other level in 1968 when Eugene McCarthy should have been the nominee instead of Hubert Humphrey. And then you let 72 happen, where basically the Democratic Party establishment got in bed with the GOP to ensure that George McGovern lost in the biggest landslide this country's ever seen. And then ever since then, that neoliberalism has completely permeated through the party. It's not like it's something that wasn't there. It just happened to get in at the right time because Ross Perot decided to run for president, although I'm still convinced to this day that there was something going on between Ross Perot, the Clintons, and the Walton family in Arkansas. And so nothing would surprise me. But remember, we're just commoners on the outside looking in. We only know a small fraction of what really goes on behind the scenes. And yet I love people who like to stand on their soapboxes, even the everyday people who think they really know how politics works in the United States. They don't have a clue. They have no clue, and they have no clue how much money and power we're talking about here and how quickly these things can move. The reason that you do not have the New York Health Act is because there are tens of billions of dollars a year that people who invest on Wall Street alone are dependent on a for-profit system to exist. If that didn't exist, then that is a chunk of their money that they don't have anymore. Now, of course, it would go into the hands of working people, and we can't have that in this country. That is where the difference lies. So my question to you guys is, where does the fight go from here pertaining to something like the New York Health Act? Because, Marco, as you said, electoral politics matters, but it doesn't matter as much as people think it does if you're not fighting for the right issues to further that initiative at the ballot box. So where do things stand, and how are we going to enact that type of change? One of you guys is itching to get in here. So
I'm gonna jump in. So I have a slightly different opinion around electoral politics than Marco, and I respect his opinion, because I do agree we need to organize with labor, right? So it's a huge component of what needs to happen. And, a national strike, the UAW, Sean Fain, 2028, I'm glad that he said in 2028 and not next March, because you hear too often the national strike is going to happen on Monday. Everybody stop working. That doesn't do anything, right? We have to be organized around this. We have to get organized around this, and we have to organize within our communities. And when we talk about electoral politics, a lot of what happens in your daily life, the federal government sets policies, et cetera, but it is very local, right? It's very local when it comes to taxes, who's paving the road, where our money is going to go for schools. The federal government does not fund every public school, but your state government does, and your local county does, and your local school district does. So it's who gets into those offices that decide a lot about what happens in our lives. So I look at it this way: it's a two-part situation. You've got to organize in your community around issues that you care about, and then you have to, within that organizing, you find people who are your allies, who are your friends, who are the people that you want to run for office, and you get them into those local offices, because it's those people who come from within your ranks that move up. How does the president, someone isn't born, well, there's a few people that may have been born to become president, but, people get into the Senate, people get into Congress, these people are, they can be from us, and they should reflect us. And I think that's a big part of the problem, is that people don't see themselves reflected in government, right? They see very wealthy, old, rich white guys making a lot of decisions about what happens, and that'll be on the local level, and that could be on the federal level. And if you don't see yourself reflected in your government, you don't feel part of your government, you don't trust your government. And so that's something that has to change. The government is there to serve us. We all joke about the DMV, we joke about all these others, institutions. Well, your school is part of your government. Your healthcare system can be part of your government. Medicare, Medicaid. These things have to be, they have to work for us, and we have to get people in office that are going to make sure it does. And we have to become engaged. And voting is the simplest form of engagement. There has to be more, I believe. I do think you need to get informed. Like you mentioned, Pete, like a lot of people don't know how things seem to be running. I call them barstool presidents, right? They sit in the bar stool. They say, if I was president, I know what to do, right? And they have no idea really what has to happen. And I think everyone here in LAA has had some experience of what needs to happen, on the local level, whether it's organizing your local Starbucks, or it's fighting for, clean water, or it's the New York Health Act, whatever it is, we know it takes organizing to happen. I'll give you a great example. Last year and this year, working with the Working Families Party and the DSA and New York Communities for Change, we've done a lot of work locally in Nassau County for the Rent Stabilization Board, right? We have rent stabilized apartments in Nassau County, and the funny part of it is that they have public hearings, but the tenants don't know they're happening. So, a notice goes out in the paper, the landlords are notified, and the landlords are supposed to post something in the buildings, but they don't. And we don't know who the tenants are that are rent stabilized unless we knock on their doors. So last year we knocked on a lot of doors. We got a lot of people to come out, speak at the hearings, and instead of them raising their rent, because they were asking 4% and 6%, they did zero. It was a huge win. There was no rent was raised in the village of Hempstead. It was the biggest turnout we saw in years. And that was because we got organized, we knocked doors, we got people out. We're doing it again this year. And the landlords came out saying, don't punish us. Don't punish us, raise their rent. Well, they didn't raise the rent because they weren't doing the services. They weren't providing what was needed. And the tenants had a chance to speak up and get out there and speak to the rent board. I think it's a great example of what can happen on a local level if you're organized and you make it happen. So no change happens if you do nothing.
I definitely agree. I am in commercial real estate for my career, and I can tell you that one of the most devastating elements of what we're dealing with today has to do with, unfortunately, what is the signature issue that I actually think RFK is running on that actually matters and is actually a good thing. The entire system of private equity in the United States has basically captured everything, whether it's BlackRock, whether it's State Street, whether it's Vanguard. And their ability to basically just buy up all homes, turn everybody into a renter, never be able to build generational wealth. And the fact that there are laws in place to stop this and people don't do anything because no one wants to enforce laws against corporate special interests. And in this case, it's only getting worse and worse and worse. So when people talk about collective organizing, this is where it matters. This is where the labor movement is everything. Because if you don't fight back against this, we are losing our country. And the people with the most power, they're fat like hogs at this point. They don't care. They'll just explode. They're not going to fix the problem. They don't want to fix the problem. They want to live like kings and they want us to be serfs. So how we're fixing that, all corporate ownership of homes should be illegal. I personally will not work with any of these major conglomerates. I work only with entrepreneurs. That's my choice. But that's not a law. I'm making a moral choice to not do that. But there's a lot of people who don't care. Their attitude is, well, I'm going to go with a major real estate company because they have the most money and I want the money. That's all I don't care about the freaking people who live in these apartments and have to pay rent. Doesn't mean anything to me. If the rent that's average in Long Island City should be $1,700 a month, but you are going to pay $2,700 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, then that's what you're going to fucking pay because no one's enforcing the law.
It's higher. It's
even higher than that. That's my point.
You could pay $4,000 for a one-bedroom.
And somebody who is a greedy capitalist is looking at it as, I want to buy another apartment building.
It's an investment. It's not about housing people. That's the thing. It's about profit. It's about investment. And housing is a huge issue that we're seeing in New York. There's coalitions, Housing Justice for All. They came out. The big push they had was for good cause eviction, meaning like you just can't evict somebody because you're an asshole. You gotta evict somebody because there's got to be a reason for it. I mean, an asshole. The landlord's an asshole. I'm saying the tenant. Right. And so one of the things has been explored in New York, and I know it's elsewhere because I've been on calls around infrastructure and speaking with people in Alaska, et cetera, and across the nation. They look at social housing. So social housing would be the government building housing that would be affordable, permanently affordable. Right? You're not going to have to worry about it not being so. And
how dare you be a communist, Joe?
How dare I? Right?
How dare you?
I'm perfectly fine with that. So, in social housing, so we want to establish the social housing authority in New York, which would build housing and also support land trusts and land banks and people having the option to buy. If a landlord wants to sell the building, the first people should be given the option to buy are the tenants, right? And that there's a piece of legislation out there for that, which would say and it's the same thing. I think Richard Wolff has talked about this multiple times, and I think it's something you'll see. I think Britain has this law too. So if there's a manufacturer or some business in Britain and they move and they want to sell off to somewhere else outside of Britain, the first people they have to offer the business to are the employees. So that's something, in the sense of housing, you can offer to tenants, and then this, the state can subsidize that because not everybody's going to be able to afford it. But then they're cooperatives, and then they own their homes. And as you know, so the idea of housing is that it should be no more than 20 to 25% of your income, regardless of your income. So if you're making $20,000 a year or you're making $200,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying more than 20 to 25%. And rent burden is 30% or more. And the majority of people in New York are rent burdened. So they're paying over a third of their income. Think about that. What do you have left?
50%.
Right? Yeah, 50%.
Sure.
You don't have anything left. You don't have
No.
anything
Well,
left.
hold on a minute. Here's the thing. 50%, you can pay that and you can still live. The problem is you don't have any money to put away. You are not growing money.
What growing money? What is that? What, please, with those foreign
Exactly.
concepts, sir. Oof.
And that in itself is one of the biggest problems that we have and why this system is going to break. Because it's already
That's why
broken.
nobody has any trust in the system. Trust in the system. I don't have any savings. What do you mean trust in the system?
Hey, listen, you know what? I freely admit this, and I'm very open about it. There were a number of people that I was in talks with. The Israelis own a lot of commercial real estate. And after their opinion about the Palestinian people and about genocide in general became pretty clear, whether on their LinkedIn posts or having one of them tell me flat out that I'm going to give $1 million to the IDF, I'm not working with people like that. I don't care how much money they have, and I don't care how much real estate they own. You have a choice. You can choose to be a part of the problem, or you can choose to be part of the solution. Now, I can't control the federal government because it's captured by corporate special interests, but we as a society can collectively figure out how to work together to stop this from happening. Yes, you can stop George Latimer from unseating Jamal Bowman, but there will be other fights. This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
What I do think has changed, and we can conclude on this note, is that I think the cat really is out of the bag now. I don't know how many other surprises the powers that be really have to throw at us until I would love to hear your thoughts on this as we wind down. Because I don't think they have too many arrows in their quiver anymore. I think they've basically thrown their cards on the table and have just gone completely transparent in their corruption of the system. It's very easy to say that it's all about Donald Trump when in reality, it's the system that's rotten. Notice how no one who's in power ever wants to address the fact that the current structure of the capitalist system is broken. It is completely broken, period.
Before we wind up, I just wanted to give you some positive news about the New York Health Act. And then I would like Tila to talk about some positive things going on the Shinnecock Reservation.
Please.
So what you should know is that you know Melanie DeRigo fairly
Yes.
well. So Melanie wanted me to impart to you some changes that have occurred. She inherited a strong structure from the prior people that were running the Campaign for New York Health, but they've rebranded it and given it a new logo, and they have new legislative support. So she wants me to impart to you that as of last month, let's say, we have 3 more assembly members that are co-sponsoring the New York Health Act. And for the first time ever, the New York Democratic Party passed a resolution in support of the New York Health Act. That's the first time. And this act has been on the books since 1992. So that's telling you something. She also wanted me to share with you that both majorities support in the chamber. Right now, the votes are there for it. It's in committee. It's in the health committee. She expects it to come out. We're hoping for a vote this year. It looks positive. What else? What she's done differently is the organization really was based out of New York City, and a lot of the organizing came from New York City. She's moved it around the state. So just recently, there was a conference up in Buffalo. She said it was well attended. She's got more groups signing on. One of the new members now that supports the New York Health Act is Planned Parenthood, which is a good group to get on there.
I'm actually surprised.
Yeah, and she's got she's building hubs all over the state to get out the word about the act and how we get involved.
Is India Walton helping out at all?
Which person?
India Walton.
Probably. I can't say directly, but I wouldn't doubt it. She says where she needs help is in money. They could use some more donations, and small dollar donations are appreciated. $5, $10. They would go to the Campaign for New York Health, which is www.ccnh.org. www.nyhcampaign.org. I'll do that again. Small donations are appreciated. www.nyhcampaign.org. That's my 2 cents there. And then I'm going to add my 2 cents now. I think along the lines of Marco that we need to have some kind of actions, not just in New York State, but nationwide. I'm willing to organize, if anybody wants to help me, a national die-in where we actually have people who die in front of different hospitals and put their actual names of the people who died because they couldn't afford the bill, or for a variety of reasons, the system bankrupt them. I think we need to do another level of protest from not only within the system, but from outside the system. So that's going to be one of my little projects there. Maybe a New York State die-in to start out and then go national with it.
Well, if there's any state that can pass the universal healthcare system at the state level first, it is definitely New York.
I got to put it out for a vote. Last year, Andrea Stewart Cousins sat on it. And what's it, Carl Hastings? They sat on it.
Hochul doesn't want this. So if the government.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Joe hit it right on the head. You see,
Yeah.
Hochul is just as corrupt as Cuomo or anybody else.
We got to get rid of Hochul.
I mean,
as well.
she's literally going to ban masks in the subways and in protests, etc. I mean, and people are wearing masks. One, they don't want to be doxxed. That might be a reason why they don't want to wear a mask. The other is they don't want to get sick. COVID's still happening. It's real. It's very contagious. It's out there. I know people who just recently got it again. I know people with long COVID. I know people that had COVID multiple times. And, just saying, well, we don't want you on the subway wearing a mask. Well, a lot of people can't travel on the subway if they don't wear a mask.
First of all, the fact that this is even an issue is so effing ridiculous. If people want to wear a mask, they can wear a mask. If they don't, they don't. What is this shit? And it's unbelievable how New York
System of oppression. It's just, and this law existed before the COVID shutdown. There was a law that prevented you from wearing a mask in public. So, and it was something that existed, and a lot of the Republicans fought against them repealing that law because in order to have a mask mandate, you had to repeal that law. Now they're going back, and you have Democrats willing to throw us under the bus and our health because of their weird fascist ideologies. So we always forget people who are most vulnerable. We sacrifice them. We throw them up on the altar to die for profit and their, I can only say again, weird ideologies, because it's alien to me. So, and Hochul's constantly proved that. We had on Long Island, we were trying to municipalize the Long Island Power Authority, right? So we have a private-public partnership with our electric company, right? So it should be a public utility 100%. LIPA owns the infrastructure, but PSE&G is the service provider, right? They're the ones that take care of the grid, et cetera, and they charge us exorbitant rates. And they're never prepared for the storms like Superstorm Sandy, et cetera, and they're willing to turn people off, in the middle of the winter. A lot of work was done along that. Tila knows about this. Bob knows about this. We needed to change that and become a fully public utility. I am pretty sure Hochul helped kill that bill with Long Island Democrats. Okay? Long Island Democrats. Kevin Thomas was the senator in Nassau County who was taking on that on the Senate side. We had Fred Thiel, and Tila knows Fred. He had it on the Assembly side. And this was going to help us become a fully public utility, which would have served us better and also help us fight climate change, the effects of that, because we would have been able to move towards a more greener, energy system. And so instead, Kevin Thomas sat on that bill the entire session, killed it. He's a Democrat, okay? And I'm pretty sure he took his marching orders from Hochul. So this is what we're dealing with. These people do not care. They do not care about the working class. No. And the majority of us are working class. And matter of fact, I think most people are socialists; they just don't know it yet. So,
I'll tell you who is socialist. The rich. That's who the real socialists are.
You got Marcos laughing. Can we just finish up with Taylor talking about what's going on with the Shinnecocks, especially the kelp farmers?
Yeah, I'll just finish up by saying, Shinnecock Nation, we've experienced this American experiment. We know firsthand the fallacies of American property law. We have seen the failure of centralized power, but we've thrived on collective power. And I think that there's other models that have been proven to be successful in this country. And until we can organize and empower one another to follow the collective models that empower all disadvantaged and disenfranchised people who have been subject to displacement, dispossession, enslavement, theft of land, resources, etc., I don't think that we're going to be able to truly and equitably move ahead. So it's up to all of us to take back that power and collectively fight back against these interests that are so centralized and benefit very few people. And so I'll leave it at that.
Couldn't have said it better. And of course, you are the real American. We're just here on borrowed land. But no, jokes aside, I think we can come to a consensus on a lot of things. And that's why, I don't push people away. I get really tired of people saying that we can't get along with people like libertarians, for example. There's common ground to be found. But once you identify what the core issue is here, which is, of course, corporate special interests have captured our government. And the only way that that's going to change is when we collectively fight together across all political spectrums and recognize that it is a very specific type of fight. Because George Latimer is just a cog in the equation. He is a nobody, and he's an asshole, and he's a bigot on top of that. But he is willing to play that role.
Other than that, he's a nice guy, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, he's
That's my humor.
Frickin' Westchester, frickin' Chappaqua, and the audacity of her to show up at the Tony Awards. But of course she would. What else is new? And the point is, when you think about the things that need to happen, I feel like because this mask has just been completely ripped off, we kind of see the system for what it is now in a lot of ways. We don't know all the moving parts, but we kind of get a sense of where the problems lie related to everything that's happened over the past few years, particularly when Biden completely destroyed his presidency in the first 100 days, when he said that I'd like to give you a $15 minimum wage, but the parliamentarian says I can't do it. It's like, okay, well, there you go. You've admitted that not only are you not going to fight for that, you're not fighting for the PRO Act either. And then over time, you saw exactly what happened in foreign policy. And what you realize is that all the things that we could have that could make our lives better, we don't get them because the people in power do not want us to have anything. They would prefer us to basically be a serfs class forever and just make it worse. I think we can fight our way out of it, but it's going to take a lot of checking the egos at the door. And I do think that what you guys are doing on Long Island, as I've always said, is fantastic. It is very necessary. I'm sure you've got some aces up your sleeve about what to do about Jay Jacobs. I'm sure the same is going to be true about what is going to need to be done about the current governorship in the state, because that's going to be an issue. There are good people in elected office. There are other people that should be there that are not. And I'm sure that they're going to have some things to say over the coming years as we go forward. But this is a very trying time right now. A lot of people, as Marco pointed out earlier, and I agree with him, people are very dissuaded from electoral politics right now. And I understand why. It's not hard to see.
It's not my fault. It's not your fault.
No, but
you can't blame the party. The party can't constantly just be blaming the constituents, the voters. It's never, let's be introspective and let's look and say why did 2000 happen? Why did 2016 happen? Like, why did these things happen? Why did 2010 happen? And there's never any accountability.
Correct. But eventually enough people are going to look around and say, no, it's got nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that they are bought and paid for, full stop. There is no secret sauce here. This is very plain and simple. The party is funded by Wall Street and Silicon Valley, which is made up of quasi-billionaires who run the world. And they decide how this is going to go down. They want to get a chess piece off the board in Jamal Bowman. Maybe they'll get him. Maybe they won't. Maybe Jen Perlman will unseat Debbie Wasserman Schultz and things will start to maneuver in a better way here in the state of Florida, which I'm hoping you guys will all join on phone banking as we go forward after Jamal wins his race next Tuesday. But with that being said, if we collectively work together, these changes can happen, but we have to continue to get smarter. If people that are in the movement are not giving up on the New York Health Act, it means they're figuring out different ways to eventually put them in a corner where they can't get out of it, where they're basically, the people will have the power, not the politicians. And when that happens, that's when change is going to happen. It's going to happen fast. Because if the state of New York gets something significant for working people, then the rest of the country is going to be like, well, I wanted to. You're not going to just have one. That's why the codification of women's reproductive freedom is happening a lot faster, because once they saw it happening in red states, they realized, oh, guess what? People can actually make these decisions for themselves. And so let's keep fighting the good fight. If you guys have any parting shots or thoughts before you go, you're welcome for the floor. But I am very appreciative that you guys came on this evening. It's always a lively conversation. And I appreciate all that you guys do.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.
Let's bring it home for Jamal, and then I'll be bugging you guys for Jen right afterwards. Long Island activists, Robert Buonaspina, Joe Sackman, Marco Lamas, and Tella Loge.
It's Tila. She's probably cringing right now.
Tila
Troge.
I'm sorry to say Tella. I apologize. Tila Loge. I was close, and I wasn't looking at anything. I
mispronounced her name many times at the get-go, but eventually we get it right. Tila.
Appreciate you all. Have a great evening, and thanks for all that you do.
Bye. Take care. Give our best to Jen.
We definitely will. She's in the chat. So as you can imagine, it does take a lot of time and effort to build these coalitions and these movements. And needless to say, sometimes these movements get knocked off their pedestal. And it's very unfortunate when it does happen, especially when it happens to one of the very best that I've seen in the political arena. And of course, I'm talking about Claire Daly. So she had some things to say, even though she was unceremoniously unseated from her seat very recently in the British Parliament, which of course we all hated to see. But as an activist, perhaps she'll become even more powerful than she's ever been.
This report has the audacity to claim that the EU always seeks to reduce the risk of escalation. No, it doesn't. We are witnessing the collapse of the post-war system instigated by the US and Europe, all to shield Israel, our outpost, from consequences. It's a rogue state vested in ensuring instability in the region and US geopolitical goals. In the last month, it's bombed Palestine, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, all the while claiming it's the victim. It's occupied parts of these countries and bombed them so often that we don't even generally give it a mention. They're doing everything they can. Desperate.
Notice how when she's speaking, Mickey Dolenz is the only person that's there by her side. And on top of that, notice how the parliament is very small. Not a lot of people there. You know why? Now, they may not have, the UK may not have government as bad as we have here in the United States, but it's so corrupt. And the people that are bought off by corporate special interests in that part of Europe, well, it's easy to see why they don't want to hear from people like Claire Daly. Because over there, the Irish will tell you exactly what they're thinking, and they won't hide it. Travers knows what I speak of. Let's continue.
Acts of aggression to provoke a wider conflict with Lebanon, with Iran, with anybody, to draw in the US, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. Illegal, unprovoked, unjustified airstrikes on Yemen. Clearly, you couldn't care less about peace in Yemen if you're standing by and seeing civilians being bombed in Yemeni cities who've had nothing got to do with.
And she's 1,000% right, because as we know, everything that's going on in Yemen has been completely disregarded over the past few years, partly because Trump isn't in the White House right now. And we are a nation that is so dependent on foreign oil, particularly from Saudi Arabia, because we will simply not move fast enough to get a clean energy grid so we're not dependent on fossil fuels, which again, if Trump gets in, he's going to get off of foreign oil. He's just going to drill here. He's going to contaminate even more water supply because we could certainly afford more of that shit. No, we recognize as a people these problems, even though we have a suppressed channel. For those of you who are watching and spread the word and get it out there, people just need to understand that so many of these problems that we are dealing with, they can easily be fixed. Claire Daly knows the score and knows it well. That's why speaking truth to power is so dangerous. And that's why the powers that be move heaven and earth to stop it, because they have nothing to stand on. Nothing. Zero. So that is why they have to do what they're doing. They must suppress. They must attack. Otherwise, what are they supposed to do? If they just had a fair fight, they'd lose every time. They could never win. But that's not the system we live in yet.
This. 2 weeks ago, Israel bombs Iran's embassy in Syria, an act of aggression against two states, the UN Charter and the Vienna Conventions. Not only no condemnation, but defence of Israel against retaliation. The US has never respected international law. It was always one law for their friends and another for everybody else. Lawless, barbarous acts to inflame the region, when the truth is that the EU has been seriously active, not in preventative diplomacy, but in preventing diplomacy. But after 6 months of throwing international law on the bonfire in Gaza, something is broken. We are in freefall. The very same international law that a horrified world has watched being trampled into the ruins of Gaza, while the EU hands Israel more weapons.
Unmute yourself, Pete.
Thank you for pointing that out. There was a lot of noise going on outside. That's why I did that. So thank you, fellow producer. It means a lot. Not only does my Irish pride sing when I hear Claire speak, and she's the real deal, but she's absolutely right. There is no coming back from what Israel has done to the Palestinian people. Now everything's on the table. International law, funding, everything. What's to trust? Just as I've pointed out for the longest time. My defense is not of the Russians over the Ukrainians. My issue has always been that this was an avoidable conflict, but because of the way that our nation in particular operates when it comes to foreign policy and always needing a boogeyman, just like the similar thing is going to happen if we're not careful in Taiwan. This is how it happens. And what is so incredible is when people like Claire Daly, who understand that she may end up becoming a martyr politically as a result, and it happened. She lost her position because the UK Parliament did everything in their capacity to make sure that she lost. They moved heaven and earth to get her out of that spot. But that's not going to shut her up, because much like Jen running against Wasserman Schultz, the goal is to get to Capitol Hill and be just like Claire Daly, to make them scared shitless to have to listen to somebody like this, because what ends up happening is they wake people up. They inform them about the realities of how the global superpowers operate. Not that we're bringing democracy to the rest of the world. No, we're just figuring out a way to pillage and take money and power. That's it. And Claire, so eloquently, not so eloquent, we Irish are not that eloquent, very direct. That to me says everything about what's going on right now. And by unseating her, she's now going to become twice as powerful as far as I can see. And maybe she'll try to win her seat back. You never know. But she is a balls to the wall. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do it my way. And that's the attitude that people who really care need to be doing. There are a number of people in political office right now who don't operate that way. They don't have this type of courage. She's got it all, and it means a lot to see.
And cheers on the genocide. They are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror. Without them, it would already be over. Strikes on hospitals, normalised. Famine as a weapon of war, normalised. All with impunity. You can't even call for it to stop. You can't even call for a ceasefire. Well, of course you can't, because these crimes against humanity are being carried out with your weapons, in your name, when you stood with Israel a month ago and you said you'd stand with them now and in the days to come. So don't come in here trying to wipe the blood off with belated concern. It's over. The EU has no moral authority. If you want to sort the situation out, end the genocide.
And the genocide, what more can you say? And her voice, while it may be alone in many respects, that voice is louder than 100 voices who are supporting the Israel genocide. That's the truth. Big Dumb Animal, thank you so very, very much. It is much appreciated. It's good to see you. There is no question that if Jen is successful, that a lot of it will hinge on this idea that people are finally ready for change, and then you might actually have a representative on Capitol Hill that is willing to conduct herself like Claire Daly. Now imagine what that would be like. That's the type of representation we need. We need a real fighter. We need somebody who isn't afraid to lose their seat. That's how you get change. That's how you build collective power in the streets and on Capitol Hill. There's no other way. That's the only way it can happen. And eventually you come into these communities locally. And that's why this is a real fight that I think Jen can win over the next 2 months, the next 9 weeks, where you have to collectively, aggressively be fighting tooth and nail to connect with as many people as you can, to let them know that change is possible. And it may be scary at first. It may be scary for a lot of people. But even people that I talked to when I canvassed this afternoon, even somebody who is in their late 70s and has supported Wasserman Schultz for years, but I didn't let her off the hook. I always know when I'm talking with somebody who's a Wasserman Schultz voter and a Wasserman Schultz sycophant. There's a difference. Now, a Wasserman Schultz voter who says that I like her, but is open to listening about the perspective of, well, maybe this might actually make sense. Maybe I actually should consider whether or not Debbie Wasserman Schultz might not be the person to support this time around. Maybe I need to think about people other than myself. This person I spoke to is in their late 70s and lives in a very comfortable suburban middle-class neighborhood in Broward County, Florida. They don't have much of any concern in the world. They have a nice home. They clearly have their Medicare. They have their Social Security. They may have a pension. They have a nice idyllic existence. What do they care? It's the American way to give a shit about you and you only. But eventually, you start to see the writing on the wall and you realize, man, maybe things aren't so good. And when somebody like that is willing to listen about the perspective of, well, if you're really concerned about making sure that Amendment 4 passes in November, you're going to need somebody who can go to different places in the state to fight on that behalf, to be a real leader, not necessarily for the Democratic Party, but just in politics in general, for issues that really matter. The person in question who's currently in the leadership position, who has been in elected office in this area for over 30 years, that's a generation. And eventually people that have been voting for her for a generation may finally see the writing on the wall. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. You got to build relationships. You have to build rapport. You have to build community ties. If you do that, then you just have to be likable. And the other person has to be not so likable. And you put those two things together, you catch lightning in a bottle and you can make something happen. It doesn't happen often because most people don't know how to do it. That is one thing I've learned. Even people that portray themselves as ones who do. I can assure you that most people don't know what they're doing. And even the ones that have all of the money and all of the influence, a lot of them, they don't know what they're doing. When you have money, when you have influence, that can actually take you pretty far despite incompetence. Colin, if you could pull up the tweet that I sent you earlier regarding Wasserman Schultz and what the legal component is that she may be facing. So, for those of you who obviously have been paying attention, I brought this up and I'll bring it up again. Wasserman Schultz, for all intents and purposes, in the Democratic Party, especially, there's a few exceptions. You know, you want to say somebody like Richie Torres, Chuck Schumer, fine. But for all intents and purposes, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the Democratic Party spokesperson for Israel. Now, how they could be this stupid, I don't know, but that's not something that you're going to get an answer from me on that I actually would understand. Because I don't. I think Debbie is one of the most revolting people I've ever seen in political office. But Wasserman Schultz, by going on to CNN with Dana Bash and making a statement, continuing to perpetuate the story about 10/7, saying, I'll carry the images of sexual violence from 10/7 with me for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, of course, it always becomes it's the GOP's fault. The GOP voted to defund programs to combat gender-based violence and assist survivors. So, of course, everything is getting tweaked in that direction to suggest that it's always about the GOP, and that's who she's fighting against, because when I have to sit through city council and association meetings and she's there, it's the same song and dance. It's like a robot. I'm your Democrat. I'm protecting you from the big bad GOP. That's my role. That's what I'm doing for you. I may not really be offering you anything in terms of a tangible improvement on your life, which you desperately need, but I'm going to protect you from it getting worse. That's what she sells. Thank you, Dana Bash, for covering Sheryl Sandberg, who, for those of you who may know, Jen Perlman knows personally, and VP Kamala Harris for confronting 10/7 deniers and revisionists. So she's still doing this, even though this has not only been debunked by the United Nations, but many publications that are even conservative. They're finally admitting that this is bullshit. Is it possible that there has been sexual violence by Hamas perpetrated on Israeli women and children? Of course it's possible. But what she is claiming has been debunked. She's saying she's seen footage. It doesn't exist. There is not even still images that have ever been produced. And she is still sitting there saying, I see stuff that nobody else gets to see. Who in the fuck died and made you queen? Pull up the other tweet, please. Johnny Graz, who I actually had dinner with Jimmy Dore a number of years ago. We'll leave it at that. Does a lot of work on social media. Works really hard at this. I give him credit because he was a trip. I had a good time hanging out with him. So Johnny Graz says, by lying about sexual violence that never took place, Debbie is in direct violation of 18 U.S. Code 1091, Section C, incitement of genocide, or incitement to genocide. Each offense carries a 5-year prison term and a $500,000 fine. There is no statute of limitations. If it can be shown that she coordinated in any way with Israel, the charges become conspiracy to commit genocide, which carries the death penalty under 18 U.S. Code 1091, Section D. No one is above the law. And you know what? He's right. Even Wasserman Schultz. And how do I know that Debbie Wasserman Schultz has ties to Israel, to Israeli intelligence? Well, Have you seen the publicity photo that she took recently with Netanyahu? I'm sure, Colin, you could grab that one relatively easily. But I want people to see this. I want people to know just who this representative really is and who she aligns herself with. By the way, I just came across this. The way that this woman tokenizes people is insane. And the fact that she is still able to get away with it, hopefully not for too much longer, is really disgusting. And I hope enough people see it. Maybe they do. I know I've seen it for far too long, and it's been a long time coming, and there are no guarantees that Jen is going to be able to pull this off. But I think we have a shot. That I do believe. But we need, like I said, everybody's help. Collectively, we can work together and make this happen. Colin, were you able to? Okay, so here is one of the photographs. Now, of course, it's not a photo where it's just her alone, but you get the idea. The most important thing about this particular photograph is that you will notice that this is just one. See, now this photo, as you can probably garner from your own observation, this is when Debbie Wasserman Schultz just got into Congress back in 2004. Certainly a lot younger looking, but already knew the score at the very beginning of her political career. She wanted to amass power, and she was determined to get as much of it as she could, and eventually made her the head of the DNC. This is 20 years ago. This is a photograph that was taken a month ago. So how much has really changed? Not much. Do you think there might be some coordinating with a foreign government that this representative has been doing for a long time, especially right now? In light of everything that's going on, in light of all of the children that have been massacred, this is what she's doing. If you want to see Jen unseat this wench for good, then I would highly recommend that you sign up to Phone Bank with us. That would mean a lot. If you don't want to see this image anymore, and Lord knows I don't, because normally I would say she's standing next to a war criminal, but then I could also say that he's standing next to one also. Make sure that you click that link or go to that link and sign up to Phone Bank. We need all the help we can get. We're not taking any chances. 60 days or 62 days. Travers, I would love to see it. I am sure your accent would be very appreciated. When people hear you calling from another country, Lord knows they're going to get a kick out of that. I know I would. All of you guys. Or if you just want to contribute, anything that you can do is tremendously appreciated. Frankly, I don't know why anybody doesn't challenge her legally. I mean, this is like pretty clear, as far as I can tell. But like I said, and this is the full circle of the conversation, I think a lot of things are changing. I do. I think a lot of people are looking around and seeing that this woman does not represent our country. She doesn't represent her people. She is a self-serving career politician who's been in elected office in this county for over a generation. And she thinks she belongs. She thinks she should stay there for the rest of her life. And you know how I know she thinks she should stay there for the rest of her life? She doesn't groom anybody. She doesn't help anybody. The only people that she's helping right now try to get into elected office are fellow Zionists, and that's a fact. That's who she's helping. She has thrown so many people under the bus, and she has done so many underhanded tactics, but that's not a surprise because that's how she does business. That's how she's always done business. That's not a new thing. Do I care if she knows who I am or sees me at these events and is, understanding that I'm never going to leave her alone? I don't care. I know most people don't like her, but then again, most people don't challenge her the way that she's been challenged, at least not this time. When Tim Canova challenged her in 2016, he challenged her with a lot of money, but he had no community ties and he didn't know how to build them. Now she's being challenged by somebody who actually knows how to build relationships that actually have teeth, not just token relationships for the sake of getting one's vote, but real relationships that can actually change the lives of the people who need it the most. And that's the change that people are starting to notice. Is there enough time to get the vote splits necessary to get her out? Maybe. But there are no guarantees, and we're not there yet. If the election was held today, Jen would lose. But that doesn't mean that the next 2 months that we can't pull it off. If you want to help and if you want to get involved, this is the opportunity to do it. So get involved. Because Lord knows I am. And I can't do it alone. And neither can Jen. So with that said, we are going to cover, I think, another subject. If Jen got elected to Congress, she would be the United States version of Claire Daly. If you want to see the U.S. version of Claire Daly on Capitol Hill, support Jen Perlman, because that's what you'll get. Our good friends over at Status Quo have been covering some very interesting developments in the Zionist movement. So as you know, for those who don't think this is a genocide, they are doing some serious land grabs right now, and it's getting ugly. So when you're auctioning off people's land, and Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that this was done in Englewood, New Jersey. Is that where this is taking place?
Let me double check, actually. Give me one sec.
Well, let's pull it up so you guys get an idea of what was going on today.
Go to Beirut! Go to Beirut! Go to Beirut!
Somebody get the fuck out of here!
Go to Beirut!
Get off the street now!
Excuse me. Excuse me.
I can stop you if I want to. If I want to, I can stop you. If I want to, I can stop you. You're gonna hit the woman. You're gonna hit the woman. Come on, man. Come on. No.
That's one. There's more. It looked like New York. Don't want to prejudge, but it looked like New York. What I find most interesting about the Hasidics, even though they are the most devout Jews in the world, they are now being physically assaulted by the Zionists, and the NYPD are just standing there doing nothing. They have grounds to arrest. They do nothing. Do you know why? Because they're told not to do anything. That's the thing about certain law enforcement. And this is Prospect Park in Brooklyn. One of the biggest Jewish populations, maybe the biggest. Borough Park's another one. But yeah, you see, these men, they stand with Palestine. They don't stand with Israel. That's the thing. And it's driving them insane that the real Jews do not support the genocide and do not support this activity. But my God, talk about brazen behavior.
Palestine! Käufer, Stapler, Käufer!
You smell the virus striche behind me. They rich. Yeah, you're so scared. Run the volleyball. No, why is that getting a ticket? No, it's not legal. Where's the bomb? I fucked your mom. I fucked all your moms. Go back to Beirut.
He wouldn't know how to fuck his way out of a paper bag if he tried with that scrawny-ass bitch body of his. Boy, they really talk a lot of shit for somebody who has never properly gotten their ass kicked. Holy shit. And they're all so tough when they have everyone around. They see where I come from. In my culture, you got shit to deal with, you handle it yourself. You don't roll 10 deep. Certain cultures are different than others, but this is bad. They're all tough because they got all their friends around them. But let me assure you, if they were alone, they wouldn't say anything because they're fucking cowards. Every last one of them. They have money and power, and they buy off the powers that be, such as law enforcement, to protect them. So they can act like this. Break the law, get in that man's face. Oh, he's real tough. Let me tell you, that big brutish guy who walked over there, he's real tough with a guy who's less than half his size. But let's see how tough he is with somebody that's his size. And there isn't law enforcement around him to protect him. We'll see just how tough he is. And when you don't have a weapon, then we'll really see how tough you are. Fuck Zionists. I said it. You can record it. And if I ever run for political office, you'll have it on audio, and I'll say it again. Fuck Zionists.
I was inside all your moms, bro. Ask them. They know me.
You want to know how you know that these people are bigots more than anything else? Full stop. They don't want to associate with anybody who's not them. They only want their own. It's that simple. We got one more clip.
My uncle's a lawyer. Listen, better not be on news. ABC News. Any other.
My uncle's a lawyer with the Mossad. You see what I mean? They've got beer muscles is what they've got. They're really, really tough because they think they're untouchable. Yes, their bigotry oozes out of their pores like nobody's business. But holy shit. It's... And now they're more emboldened than ever considering the actions that are going on over there. It's incredible.
There's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestine.
And that is what they are taught. That is what they are taught. That is what they preach. They will always preach it. And that is why anyone who says that they are lying regarding Palestine, the Zionists are taught there is no such thing. Just as Jen has talked about many times before.
I'm going to buy land in Gaza. I'm going to buy beachfront property in Rafah. What happened to Rafah? No more. No more Rafah. No more Gaza. No more Rafah. No more Gaza. Thank you.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
The only person I sympathize with, only one, is this kid. What does she know? She's brought up in a household with this psychopath on her right that is her mother, teaching her this, teaching her to hate, and teaching her that her people are superior and that Palestinians aren't worth shit. Oh, excuse me, Palestinians don't even exist. They're just Arabs. Arabs aren't shit. Us Israelis, we're perfect. And this scumbag, I certainly hope. You know, the problem is that there isn't enough consequences for people like this. They never feel the wrath that they need to feel. They are never exposed the way that they should be, like economically. If he has a job, and people should know that he's a genocidal maniac. Bye-bye Rafah, bye-bye Gaza, basically saying kill them all. That is what he's saying. And that's what they believe. That's why they fight so hard. But the problem is that a lot of these people here, these people are very wealthy. They may not look it, but trust me, they have a lot of money and they have a lot of power and they use it for their apartheid state. That's what they do. And we have a lot of people in very high places in government that protect them because there is a Christian Zionist contingent in this country led by the likes of Pat Robertson and Joel Osteen that allow them to do this. It's sick. It's absolutely sick.
We're never gonna be a country to skip us. This is the only flag. Go to Gaza and just blow up already.
What they are effectively doing is isolating themselves from the rest of the world. And whether they know that now or will eventually figure it out, the thing that is not being talked about is that Israel is suffering in very large capacities now economically. And this is eventually going to come and get these people as well. And when you start to suffer economically, because again, not trying to be stereotypical, but this is a cultural appropriation within certain communities. Money and power matters a lot. It matters to everybody, but it matters a lot to the Zionist people. It just does. Now, if they start to get affected economically as a result of their support for this, oh, it'll change fast. Now, I don't think it's going to change. I think they really are so psychopathically indoctrinated that they're not capable of changing. This is the end of a genocidal movement that is eventually going to have its day of reckoning. It's going to happen. But like I said, these people that you see here in this part of Brooklyn, they live a very isolated life. They have their own food, their own stores, customs. It's kind of like the Amish in some respects. They want their own thing, but they want to control everything. That's also part of it too. And you can hear by the way that they talk about Palestinian people. They talk about them like they're not human. So, the Zionist project is absolutely ridiculous. I do not care for Jake Shields. I do not care for bigot Fuentes. You know, Nick Fuentes is no different than any of those little bitch boy kids running around claiming that, oh, my uncle's in the IDF, you better be careful, or the Mossad, you better be careful. There is no difference here. Nick Fuentes is a total opportunist. He's also an incel, from what I can tell. Maybe he's gay. Who knows? Who cares? Some people get platforms and they shouldn't have them. They're not doing anything to really help. Do I think that he gives a damn about the Palestinian people? No, I think he's just bought into this idea that politically it makes sense to have a very strong anti-war streak because it is a waste of money, and it certainly is. But I've heard enough from Nick Fuentes to know I would never trust him. I saw what AOC said on social media. I don't listen. She likes to play into all that stuff. I'm not into that. But I understand this is her style, and that's what she's going to do. I welcome anybody who's willing to fight on this issue, just like healthcare, just like the environment. If you're willing to fight, and I don't generally agree with you, that's fine. I appreciate your support. I don't have to like you or ever support you for anything. But if you're going to fight on behalf of the issues that matter the most, great. That's where I leave it. I think that's pretty cut and dry. We would be amiss not to address Bill Maher before we go. Why? Because the son of a bitch still won't stop. He's not going to stop. And to his audience, which I'm guaranteeing is probably a lot of those Zionists that we just saw, this is what he has to say about people hating the Jews. He's really going there.
Fuck Israel, stand with Hamas, kill another Zionist now, painted on the statue, death to America, of course, with 3 Ks. Death to Israel, death to Zion.
That is the cool way to do it.
Of course it is.
Yeah,
and also Ku Klux Klan, because America is run by the Klan, of course, that's right. I got a question. How come it's okay for the left to hate the Jews? Because obviously, if this was the people at Charlottesville who were doing this, wouldn't there be a bigger outcry?
So why is it okay for the left to hate the Jews? Don't I look so sophisticated in the way that I just sit back in my chair? I've got myself a nice little brandy. I've got myself my big bong cigar. You people, haven't you noticed how much smarter I am because I have these wonderful glasses that I wear every day? Don't you think I am smug as a bun? No, you're a douchebag. And all you're doing is picking out outliers. And most of the time, people just hate the Zionists. They don't hate the Jews. But anti-Semitism is rising because people like Wasserman Schultz pass resolutions that say that Zionism is Judaism and vice versa, which it isn't. And that is not something that you want to point out. Why would you? It's not good for business. And why does Ana Navarro sit on that freaking stage? Or that other gentleman who I think used to be an MSNBC regular, or maybe still is. I don't watch it, so I wouldn't know. But that's his audience, and this is who. It's amazing, amazing how much he's changed. And he likes to say that I didn't change, everyone else did. Bullshit. I see the guests that you bring on. You could easily bring on Bernie Sanders again. You never will. There's a lot of things you could do differently. You could bring on Thomas Massie. You're not going to do it. But this is just a reflection of how bad things have gotten.
I don't think that's an apples to apple type of comparison, because look, I think what's driving a lot of these protests, a lot of them might be uninformed. Like I said, I don't agree with a lot of what's being done, but the images of children that are being killed through war in Palestine, I think, has got people.
You can tell that she is a paid shill consultant and always has been. Why? Because she chooses her words very carefully. She doesn't say that it's a genocide. She says it's a war. It's not. And is trying to seem like a sympathetic figure, but she isn't. She is a total grifter of the highest order. But then again, she was a... I wonder why she's not on The View anymore.
Reacting in a certain way. But people are forgetting that this started because of what happened on October 7th. And people are forgetting that there is an administration in the White House right now that is every day trying to figure out a solution to this. And
now, this is a person who was one of a very, very high level consultant within the Bush administration. And now she basically is a lapdog for the Biden administration because she hates Trump. And it pays. I don't know how much influence she really has, if she has any at all. I personally don't think she has much. Could be wrong. But I will say, when you say that this conflict started on October 7th, you're just a paid shill. That's all. You have no moral standing. You have no affect, how could you? All you're doing by doing that is ensuring that more kids get killed. That's it.
This would be far worse without Anthony Blinken, who's, I think, aged 20 years in the last 8 months, going out there on a daily basis trying to get a peace agreement, a truce.
But what's going on is very upsetting and very horrifying, and I'm not defending anyone's actions. But what these college kids are doing that we're excusing because they don't know what they're talking about, as if a Yale education isn't better than whatever's happening for these tiki torch IT guys who are in Charlottesville. They know what they're doing and they know what they're saying, and we think it's cute because they don't look threatening because they're like comparative lit majors at Yale, but they have way more power than the people in Charlottesville. These are people who are going to
I think it's just
run
because
the
it's
country.
coming from
What a douchebag. Sorry, Joel, even if I ever met you in a political circle, I'm sorry, but you're a douchebag. And the way that affluent liberals like to talk about people, it's and you wonder why Trump is so popular. You wonder why he's likely going to be the president again. It's so incredible. It's amazing how they disrespect regular people. And of course, Bill frames it as it's the left.
the left. Everything is team sports now. Are you kidding? If the people in Charlottesville who were chanting Jews won't replace us, I mean, that's bad. It's not as bad as death, too. I think death, that's not deplorable.
It's absolutely deplorable.
Okay, well, if one side is deplorables and the other side does something that's, I mean, if I was a Holocaust survivor, and I guess there's not many of those left, but if I was, I would choose Jews will not replace us over death to Zionists.
Oh, wait a minute. He just said death to Zionists, and he's equating Zionism with Judaism. So he's playing into that bullshit. He went right for it. Didn't hesitate. And he probably needed to, if he could do it again, he probably wouldn't have said that. Because he likes to equate it as it's all the Jews. No, he said Zionists, which means that he had a Freudian slip on that last line. Israel is committing a genocide. Full stop. This isn't up for debate. Every box is checked. And famine is setting in. We didn't even get a chance to talk tonight about we will talk, I will address it on Monday because it's too late now. There's famine happening in the Sudan right now. And of course, most people aren't going to talk about it. We're living in a very, very rough time. And it sucks. And the fact that Bill Maher pretends like he doesn't get it. Anna Navarro absolutely gets it. And she's not saying what should be said because she's paid a certain amount of money not to say it. To choose her words carefully. And to be, sort of like a whisperer, if she will, at least she thinks she is for the Cuban community here in South Florida, which in maybe some way she still is. Certainly not to the extent that she once was, because she doesn't support the GOP. For them is Donald Trump, and that is that. For her, she wants to be accepted in polite society, and that's simply not allowed. So she figured out a way to play both sides. I'm a Republican and I support the GOP, but I am dead set against Donald Trump, so I'll just support Joe Biden, who might as well be a Republican because that's how we pretty much govern this fucking country. I haven't even addressed David Sirota and his genius take on this idea that Joe Biden's having a great presidency. So people are going to say what they're going to say because a lot of times, as I've often told, if you have to take the word of people that are dependent on politics to make their living, stay away from them. Because they will always let you down. That's how it is. I don't mean to end on a somber note, but that is where we are. On Monday, we're going to have a special podcast It is going to involve a pretty well-known comedian and possibly our fearless leader as well. So we'll see. I think you guys will like it. Make sure to smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to click the bell. Make sure to go to gen2024.org to sign up to Phone Bank if you can. It would be certainly appreciated. Infinite Speed, Chris Garrett, Henry Kajawa, you don't like my music, Checks WV, Self-Care Maven, Sam Stan, Steve Grossman, Travers, Ray J, Jimmy Zimzam, Tony Hamui. Tell me I got that right. That was an interesting one. Can never get them all, but I do my very best. Jennifer Perlman, thank you for being in the chat. Let's see. Yes, but no. Who else we got? Who did I forget? Got to go up the ladder. Chat has been on fire tonight. You guys are really into it. We're only 35, 40 viewers. Well, on YouTube. Got to keep up with all the channels. Got so much work to do. Big Dumb Animal, of course. Tremendously appreciated and happy to see you as always. Thanks for your support. I don't know how many more got here. Double K, of course, with your tremendous support as always. It is very much appreciated. And of course, to Teresa, Schultzy, Tony, DeMeo, Leo, thanks for checking in. Great to hear that everything went well on the canvassing trail today. And it went well for us too. We've got a big meetup on Saturday at 12 p.m. at the Aloha restaurant in Hollywood. Misty Kai and David Hunter NYC. Thank you all. It's always fun. And I really appreciate the support. I agree. It's always a healthy mix. And on that note, Jen is right. Just remember, it is all about money and power. And the sooner you understand that it isn't some grand conspiracy, we're going to get somewhere. Just see through the bullshit. More and more people got to see it, and more people got to talk about it. So with that said, appreciate you all. Make sure to smash the like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we always ask you to do because it always helps. As soon as this live stream is over, drop a comment and a like on the stream because that will help get more people to see this as well. Appreciate you all. We'll see you Monday.